Hello and welcome back to The Patient Magnet, okay? So excited. We named the podcast, okay? And in fact, this is going to lean in perfectly to the discussion that we're going to have during this first one, which is branding, okay? And you would probably see from my own effort that the brand is important, but it's more important that you do the work, okay? I would rather have a handful of podcasts out and then say, oh yeah, that's right, let's name this thing The Patient Magnet, than just be postulating for weeks on, oh, what would be so cool and blah, 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 okay? No, do the work, okay? Do the work, attract people to your business, then do the rest of it. You should have at least a working name, which is what we had. It was originally called the Aesthetic Conversion Podcast, which would have been fine. But The Patient Magnet, get out of town, okay? In the Patient Magnet podcast, we're going to teach you how to attract clients to your business, how to magnetize them to your business, how to take those clients and sell them effectively, and then have them coming back for years and years and years to come, okay? So in this episode, we're going to be talking about branding. How do we define our brand? What's important about our brand? What even is a brand? Maybe if we're kind of on a 101 level here, what is a brand? I think there's a lot of things that we might think that they are, but I want to give you a little bit of an overview on what you should stress about and what you really shouldn't stress about as a clinician or as a practice owner or a med spa owner, at least in 2024. Okay, so let's get right into it. Okay, let's first talk about what branding is versus what branding is not. Okay, here's what a brand is. A brand is the look, sound, and feel that you want to put out in the world in order to attract your dream clients. I always say your brand is a promise that you fulfill on with your services. Let it sink in. A brand is a promise that you fulfill on with your services. It's you saying to people, this is how it's going to feel when you come in. This is how it's going to look. This is how it's going to sound. This is the vibe that we're going to create. And then when you get in, you better hope to God that if you're promising luxury in your brand and then somebody comes in to an under construction zone where there's just dust everywhere and garbage everywhere, and it's like, this is not the luxury experience I was promised in my sales process. So a brand is a promise that you fulfill on with your services. You make promises in the brand marketing stage, you make promises in the sales stage, you fulfill on all of it on the services stage. Branding is not your logo. Branding is not your color scheme. Branding is not your business name. Those things lean into the brand. Those things are part of the brand. Those are not the brand. You know, it's very often that I'll ask people, oh my gosh, okay, do you have brand guidelines? And they'll say, well, we have a logo. I was like, that's not a brand guideline. That's great that you have a logo. That's awesome. You should have a logo. You've got to submit it, for goodness sake, just to even have your business live on certain platforms. So have a logo, have a business name, all of that stuff is great. But that is not the brand. The brand is the feel, the look, and the sound that you want to create, that you want to resonate with people. Now, you could say, okay, great. Well, how do I do that? Now, I'm not a branding expert by any means, okay? But I do know a thing or two. I have been in this industry for a long time as a creative. We've reinvented our own brand 4 times, if that gives you any hope for yourself. I think rebranding can be Apple's done it at least 14 times since its inception. They do it every couple of years. And you can too, by the way. You don't have to be married to any of this. What I would highly advise is that you are non-romantic about your brand. And, I hesitate to take you too far out of that romance of your brand. But because there are some people that say, you know what? No, from the day I launch it to the day I die, I want to work in this business and I just want this to be my expression of myself. And it's more or less like an art project for you. I would consider it an art project and not a business. Okay. I think that what you need to do when it comes to your brand, you need to consider the people that you want to attract, and then you need to build something that works for them. Okay. I had a great conversation years ago with Justin Harper, the owner of Aesthetic Record. He owns Aesthetic Next. He owns Lead AR. He owns Jubilee Med Spas. And we were talking about Jubilee Med Spas. And he said, the logo for Jubilee, by the way, he goes, I had one that I loved that I was like, man, that's got to be it. And I said, oh, well, why didn't you didn't use that? He goes, no. I was like, well, who picked your current one? He said, our target demographic picked it. He goes, I had one that I thought this really cool, dark blue color was going to work, or this orange color, or whatever it was, because I really liked it. And it resonated with me a lot. And it was my expression. And he goes, but we sent it out to 100 of our previous patients, and they all picked this teal logo that had a cool cursive script. I didn't like it at all, but our target demographic did. right? And it's very often that I will hear from business owners that are very insistent. Oh my gosh, it's got to be me. My touch has to be on it. And they're making themselves the brand. You are burying yourself under like your team won't be able to make decisions unless you approve of it. Like you have built yourself into the brand. So what happens? You stifle creativity all over your team. You work with a web company or a social media company, and then you don't give them any guidelines other than, oh, this is my brand. I'm the brand and blah, 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 blah. And then what happens? They pitch you something and you say, oh, that's not quite right. And they say, okay, great. Well, what's wrong with it? It's like, oh, it's just, I don't know. And the problem is that you've based the whole entire brand on feeling, and you're frustrating yourself. I guarantee it's a frustrating process to be in that position. And you're putting everybody around you at the mercy of your whims, where in 3 months you might decide, oh my gosh, that font is so out. Get rid of anything that has ever been related to that font because I don't like it anymore. It's just making a brand yield to your own whimsy. Gosh, it can just be damaging. That's my only word of caution is I would say what you should do is you should yield to your target demographic. What do they like? Where do they go? What are those brands like that they go? What are the brands like that they buy from currently? You know, I think often people, they say, oh, I want a luxury brand. So they look at high-end luxury. They look at a Louis Vuitton. You know, they look at an Hermes. They look at a Chanel, and they say, oh, I want to feel and look like these guys. Because truthfully, that's what my target demographic likes. So I want something that feels, looks, sounds, acts like those guys. And that is awesome. That's awesome. That's a great start, at least. I think there's more work to be done at that point. But leveraging an existing handful of brands to say, I want to do something in that realm that feels, looks, and sounds like that. Okay. So first and foremost, demographic selection. Okay. If you are an existing business, so if you're not an existing business, you're just launching and maybe you're looking to build your brand for your clinic. Awesome. So excited for you. If you are not in business currently, if you are at least an injector, or at least you have access to an injector, I would maybe like send out a little poll. Get your thumb on the pulse of who your target demographic is first before you build this entire brand expression when you don't fully know who you are yet, okay? So I'd get your thumb on the pulse first. Now, if you are an existing business and you're like, you know what, we want to finally really brand. I've been Jared Med Spa for so long, I want to actually have an aesthetic conversion brand. You know, that's when you could say, okay, great, we have 150 patients. Let's just put our thumb on the pulse. Let's talk to them about the brands they like, the things they engage with, and then let's make something that attracts more of our dream clients and our superstars, okay? So let's talk about a handful of the visual elements or the handful of the actual practicalities that you can do here. There's a really cool thing that I'm going to reference in a moment. It's called a brand slider. In fact, if you go to aestheticconversion.com/brandbox, we will have a little downloadable slider for you. You just got to put your email address in and we'll send it over to you. But it'll be a brand slider that you can just select how your brand feels. So it'll be like I wish I had a screenshot of it I could pull up right now. It's a series of sliders that have different tones and different voices that your business could have. So for example, it could say, oh, are we more luxury or are we more relatable? Okay. And then on that slider, you would select the point on that spectrum of, are we more luxury? Are we more relatable? Are we more athletic, or are we more leisure? You know, something like that. We're athleisure. It's like, great. That's right in the dead center. Okay. So it'll give you 10, 15 different like things that you can select. And what'll happen is as you start to put together this feel, all of a sudden you'll start to make decisions for yourself and say, oh, well, these fonts speak that, or these fonts sound like that. These colors feel like that. All of a sudden, we're going to start having this brand identity guide how we pick our colors, how we pick our expression, our imagery. So you'll have this nice little document. So if you go to aestheticconversion.com/brandbox, we'll get you that slider and you can just kind of fill it in for yourself. But here are the kind of the things that slider is going to help for you. Number one, it's going to be visual elements. So your logo design, your color palette, your typography, and your imagery. So typography and imagery are something that most people will skirt on, and they'll say, oh, we've just this one font for everything. We just use the classic one that I think everybody's used for a long time, and it's a great font, but everyone uses Montserrat. Everyone uses either Montserrat or Helvetica Neue. And a lot of people are shifting to some other fonts, but Montserrat is still kind of like a very popular one, which is great, but just saying Montserrat doesn't fully work, okay? We need to know how we use Montserrat in headings versus subheadings versus paragraphs. We need to know exactly like the weights as a web agency. Here's how you can work with your web designers if you have something written out like this, okay? Logo design and then your color palette. Again, I would lean into brand references, not just how you feel in a moment. I would build that slider and then select your colors. I think specifically within the med spa industry, it's worth looking at some clinics that are doing well and then taking note. I wouldn't lean too heavily into it because sometimes a clinic can do well and not have a great style, where it just kind of works for them because they've attracted people at this point and people know, yeah, that's just how they look. Having purple as your brand isn't going to kill you, it's just, but is it the most trendy thing? Maybe, I don't know. It depends on how you use it. I think sometimes people say, oh, well, that color's out of style. It's like, I don't know. So I would reference larger brands that are doing a really, really good job, but you can reference, local businesses as well that are maybe your competitors. Number 2 is it's going to create brand voice for you. So it's going to create a tone that aligns with your target audience, whether it's a calm tone, an authoritative tone, a friendly tone. You're going to know the voice and how you speak as a business. It won't just be based on how you personally typically write. It'll be based on how the brand sounds. For example, I write very emoji heavy. I'm very emoji heavy. I'm very expressive in the way that I text. Aesthetic conversion isn't. I mean, we will throw an emoji in there, here or there. Intelligence is kind of one of our ways that we write. That's one of our filters that we write through is intelligence. And so we write so that people feel it's like friendly intelligence, or relatable intelligence, or something like that. But we want to lean more towards that smart feel. And then it'll give you consistency in your communication across platforms. Because if you build a brand book, which is what we'll talk about in a moment, if you build a brand book that has all of these elements in it, you can hand it off to anybody and you can guarantee they are going to yield, as long as they know how to use it, but they're going to yield to how you want your brand to show up, which is awesome. Okay. That means you can trust people. You can say, hey, look, this is how we look, feel, and sound. And companies that do that to us, at least as a web agency, it's gangbusters. They get things up super quick. It is not, there isn't a lot of back and forth because they've given us a pretty firm document on how things need to go. The people who are unclear, who are maybe redesigning brands or whatever it is, the people who are unclear are the ones who often struggle, that we go back and forth with revisions because we're not getting anything solid enough to make decisions for them. Okay. And then client experience as well, the role and ambience in your actual space and how your staff interactions and customer service can contribute to your brand as well. So the way that your staff speaks, the type of language they use, the way that they hold themselves. These are things that you can have a brand standard about internally. And then you can leverage all of that in your website, in your social media, in your pamphlets. It's all going to have this cohesive feel. And instead of you or the individual, the owner, being like the end all be all for, oh, this person is the one who we have to ask, you can just reference the brand guidelines. Hey, when we use that word, it doesn't sound like, it's not as smart. Why don't we use this word instead? It feels more on brand. Oh yeah, you're totally right. And hey, we don't use that color. We use this color. Hey, we don't use that font. We use this font, which gives you consistent messaging across the board. So I want to give you a couple of practical tips. So number 1, use a brand slider. So as you're building your own brand, use a brand slider to identify how you want to feel. That's the very first start, is how does it feel? And the brand slider will help with that. And then after that, build a brand book and a brand guideline that says, here's how we use all typography. Here's the types of images that we use for our brand. Here's the voice of our brand. You know how practical that is too for the voice? If you're using ChatGPT and you have your brand voice written out, you could even have a brand prompt written down in the voice section that is a description of your brand that you can copy and paste into ChatGPT. So that anytime you give it to somebody, they say, use this, so that if you're writing copy for our business with AI, it's this prompt. That way it's consistent across the board as well. So your brand book will have typography, voice, colors, logos, and logo use cases as well. So it'll outline the dimensions of the logo and how it needs to be used appropriately, and the different acceptable versions of your logo, like a black and white version or whatever it is, or a single color version. And then imagery that you can use along with your brand. There's a great designer that I love working with. His name is Adnan. He owns a business called aestheticbrands.studio. I have a lot of clinics who have worked with him and they love him. So if you go to aestheticbrands.studio, if you need to build a brand for yourself, he crushes. And if you bring that brand slider to him and you say, hey, here's what we made using Aesthetic Conversions brand slider, he'll be able to take that and run a mile with that thing for you. So super great. Or if you're already working with a brand designer, if they haven't had you do that, if it's a great pro, then they'll probably have you do something like that, or they'll ask a questionnaire that will answer those questions, where they say, oh, do you feel more luxury or do you feel more relatable? Do you feel they'll ask those questions, and they're filling out their own little brand slider for themselves to understand who you are and how you need to present. So the final thing I'll kind of leave you with in this podcast is that I don't want you to freak out. I don't want you to be so overly obsessed with some of the items in your brand and in expression that you lose sight of how to actually build your business. And because freaking out over one color, freaking out over one font, freaking out over these things, like it doesn't build your company. Attracting people to your business builds your company. And you could say, oh, well, Jared, but if that font's wrong, then how can we ever? And it's like, okay, I mean, yes, hold people accountable, okay? But stressing about it, I don't know. I feel like I've heard of people, in fact, I know somebody very well that just won't launch their business because they're like, oh, I have to come up with a perfect name. I'm like, no, you don't. You could be Jared.com. You know, you could be, we were really good content originally, and now we're Aesthetic Conversion. You can rebrand yourself. That's the thing that you need to do right now is just get going. But if you're launching your brand or if you're considering doing a rebrand, this is a great way to start. So thank you so much for listening. Go to aestheticconversion.com/brandbox to get that brand slider. Make sure that you guys subscribe. Thanks for listening to The Patient Magnet. Okay, the first official time that we've called it that. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.